I'll never forget him telling my mom and I, like, he read it to us right there. He's like, it doesn't look good. And we're like, what do you mean? Like, I was diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer at 24 years old. I mean, of course, when you get a diagnosis, you're like, oh my God, like, I'm gonna die. Like, literally, that was the first thing that, like, I said to myself, I'm like, I'm too young, like, I don't want to die. So my name's Lainie Jones. I live in South Florida, and I am 38 years old. And I have my husband and I live together, and we have been together. Next year we'll be celebrating our 20th anniversary together, our dating anniversary, and we've been married 10 years. So he's been with me throughout my cancer journey. And then we have 2 wonderful little Boston Terriers. So I always say my hobby is shopping. I love going to the beach. I love being outdoors, and just, doing fun things and spending time with family is really just kind of sums up me in a nutshell. So my first cancer diagnosis was actually when I was 18 months old. I had adrenal carcinoma. So that was my first cancer diagnosis. So growing up, really, I knew that, I was a cancer survivor and knew that cancer was a part of my life at some point, but obviously was too young to remember. So it really kind of led me to being a nurse. And, I turned into a hypochondriac when I was a nurse, becoming a nurse, because as you can imagine, when you're in school and you're learning about all these things, you constantly think something's wrong with you. But I was late in the nursing school game. I was doing a self-breath exam, and this was July of 2008, and I felt a lump. And I went to my OBGYN, and he felt a lump too, and he gave me a prescription for an ultrasound. And I neglected to do it because I'm like, I'm 24, I've already had cancer once. There's no way I can get cancer again, right? Like, that was just my mentality. So I neglected to do it. My parents were like, you need to go get the rest of your scans because you're turning 25 and you're going to be off of our health insurance. So I got all my tests done, and I went to my OBGYN again, and I'm like, I kind of think the lump got bigger. So he had ordered a mammogram, and that's really initially, I didn't really have any like feeling or symptoms. It was mostly just a lump that I had felt for my initial breast cancer diagnosis. I had literally no other symptoms. I mean, I was perfectly healthy. And like, even to this day, like, as I mentioned earlier, I've had multiple cancers. Like, I'm very fortunate. I mean, fortunate, unfortunate, right? I went the next day to go get a mammogram, and I went to this guy in South Florida who read mammograms right away, and which was like, sometimes it takes a week to get your results, right? So we went there, and he read my mammogram, and I'll never forget him telling my mom and I, like, he read it to us right there. He's like, it doesn't look good. And we're like, what do you mean? Like, and here I am, like, just about to start nursing school, like 3.5, 4 weeks away. And he's like, I want to do a biopsy. So he ended up doing a biopsy, and I was diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer at 24 years old. It was like 2 weeks before my 25th birthday. So it was pretty crazy, pretty shocking. I never thought in that moment that I'd become the patient, let alone, not be a nurse. I never thought it was going to be anything. Like, I thought it was just going to be like maybe a cyst or something. And when I was that, I was shocked. Like, I couldn't believe it. And I mean, of course, when you get a diagnosis, you're like, oh my God, like, I'm gonna die. Like, literally, that was the first thing that, like, I said to myself, I'm like, I'm too young, like, I don't want to die. Like, I don't know. I think the scariest part for me was having to go get the additional scans after that, because you worry, you're like, where is it? Well, and that's, I just always feel like cancer, sometimes you don't have any symptoms. My blood work was never like abnormal. So I didn't really have any symptoms. And I think just in that moment, it was a pure state of shock. I processed it. And then I think what really helped me was I spoke to a volunteer through the American Cancer Society Reach to Recovery program. and she was like 60 years old, I want to say. And I mean, I didn't know her. It was just a phone call. And it was about 48 hours after I came home from my double mastectomy. And she was 60, I was 24. And I was like, wait, if she's 60 and I'm 24 and she survived breast cancer, I can do this, right? It's like, I think that we need to kind of take that stigma away of like thinking of cancer as a death sentence and thinking of it with a positive attitude, right? Like that's so important. I know it's easier to say than done. But I always tell people I cried for one day and that was it. And I said, you know what, I'm going to do this. And at that time, I feel like now, unfortunately, there's so many more younger and younger people being diagnosed, right? Especially with breast cancer. And at that time, I was kind of like on a lone island. Like there was not a lot of people who had breast cancer. It was 2008. Not a lot of people my age. And I did meet a few young people. And, you know, I think for me, I was so grateful that I had an amazing supportive family and I had an incredible husband who stood by my side the entire time. So when I was diagnosed, I was treated, I like to say, as the typical breast cancer patient, right? Like I went in, you know, my doctor knew I had adrenal cancer as a baby, but you know, again, at that time, like seeing a 24-year-old was kind of rare. So I had the standard treatment. My breast cancer was HER2 positive. So I had the HER2 receptor gene. It was like a TCH combination, taxotere, carboplatin, and Herceptin. And then that was it. Like I did the double mastectomy initially, and then I did expanders. And then I had, you know, the implants transfer, the expanders transferred out for regular implants. And then, you know, that was kind of it. And then, you know, I lost my hair, of course. But in between, so my treatment stopped, I want to say in like July of 2009. And then there's a mole on my back. And my mom's friend was like, oh, you know, I know she has a lot going on, but I just want to let you know, like, she needs to get that mole looked at. So I got it taken off and it ended up being a melanoma, which was like crazy. So like here I am, I'm like 25 now with three cancers and I'm just like, what is going on? And you know, I think the important thing is and this is something I really kind of learned along the way is, you know, a lot of times people go to a breast oncologist who specializes in breast oncology, and that's amazing, right? If you just have breast cancer. But I think something I learned is, you know, a lot of times when you have one cancer, you could get two cancers, something I never knew, right? I think, and I never look back, but I think something that maybe I would have done a little different is maybe gone to somebody who was a general oncologist, just given my history that I had adrenal cancer. I think sometimes, you know, that's not spoken about a lot is that, you know, if you've had multiple cancers, maybe it's better to be at a general oncologist because in that moment, my oncologist was kind of like, well, I only do breast cancer. So then I was kind of like, oh my God, like this is, I'm stuck here. Like, I don't know what to do, right? Like this is my third cancer. Something's not right. I should have mentioned early on, I was genetically tested when I was diagnosed with the breast cancer at 24. I was tested for the BRCA gene. I did not have it. So, you know, in my oncologist's mind, you know, you don't have BRCA, you know, I think this is just kind of like maybe a hormonal thing that you got breast cancer. And then when I got the melanoma, I started to really just question, I'm like, something's not right. I'm 25 years old. I've had three cancers. Like, this is crazy. So my mom and I were listening to Doctor Radio on like Sirius XM. And there was a woman on there or the doctor, I can't even remember how the conversation went, but they were talking about adrenal cancer and this genetic predisposition called Li-Fraumeni syndrome. And I'm like, this is like, they were just basically saying that like, if you've had adrenal cancer, there's like a 90% chance that you could have Li-Fraumeni syndrome. So we're just like, this is crazy. Like, and at that time, again, genetics were not widely talked about. It was really just BRCA. That was all like, it was just like really at the time, that's what we kind of talked about. So I asked my doctor if I can get tested for this gene. And he's like, yeah. Like, he's like, I doubt you have it. Like, he's like, that's like a textbook thing. So I was like, okay, fine. Well, he told me I was negative. So I was like, and you trust your doctors. Again, you have to trust you always trust your doctors, right? But like, also make sure you get that physical piece of paper. Like, that's just, I didn't do that. 26 comes along and I'm getting my 1-year follow-up for my breast cancer. I was doing PET scans at the time. They did the whole body PET scan. And the next day the doctor calls and he's like, there's a really big mass in your neck, and it spread to your chest. I'm like, it ended up being thyroid cancer. So here I had to go to an endocrinologist, and I'm just like, what? Like, I'm 26 years old, and here I am, I have four cancers, and I'm told I don't have Li-Fraumeni syndrome. So I'm just like, that was in the back of my head. And at that time, my endocrinologist, my surgeon, like, that's when you have amazing doctors. They sent me to MD Anderson. They're like, we're not touching you anymore. Like, we're done touching you here in Florida. You're going to you need to go to like a cancer specialized hospital, because something is just not right. Something right now. And of course, the first question they asked me when I got there was, have you been tested for Li-Fraumeni syndrome? And here's me. I'm just like, yeah, I'm negative. They're like, no, you're crazy. Like, they didn't say, they couldn't say, but in the grand scheme of things, I did end up having it. And I was never correctly tested. And listen, I'm one of those people, I don't hold grudges. Maybe he didn't know, he just thought it was a textbook. Maybe he did the wrong test, whatever it was, because people are always like, oh my God, you should go back to that doctor. Like, that's terrible. And I'm like, no, it's fine. Like, I'm just moving on. And now I know I have this genetic predisposition. And for me, it's so important because it really changed my protocol in my testings. And I know you had asked before, like, what kind of testings and treatment. So I was getting PET scans all the time, PET scans and CT scans, which is not good for somebody with Li-Fraumeni syndrome because of the radiation. And it was even more so, like, even crazier too, because like my parents, thank God, don't have it. Neither do my brothers. They don't have Li-Fraumeni syndrome. And normally sometimes it's inherited from either your parents or like your aunts and uncles or something. It's very like a close knit. But my parents, nobody in my family has it. But my parents are both cancer survivors, but they don't have the gene. We're also Ashkenazi Jewish, so a lot of times that can be a triggering factor. But thank God I have not had a reoccurrence of breast cancer since 2012. So the radiation really, it helped. But it led to also another cancer. So it's crazy, but they knew, like, we knew that it could cause another cancer. So the doctors like aggressively watched me every 3 months. I would get whole body MRIs and ultrasounds. And I want to say it was about 3 years to the day. They caught like 3 tiny, teeny spots in my chest wall of sarcoma in 2015 through an ultrasound. I always say, like, it's just so crazy. Something for me that I feel so lucky that when I was diagnosed in 2008 until now, like, we've come a very long way. We've come a very long way. And I think it's sometimes very hard for people to see that. But I've been living it. And I see people who were diagnosed, like myself, who were diagnosed in 2008, and there was still little, not little information, but things were different, right? Like, everything was different. And now I always tell people, like, as weird as it sounds, it's a good day and age to have cancer. There's so many options out there. People are living with this disease and thriving, right? Like for myself, I'm on a maintenance chemotherapy for the rest of my life, and it's literally keeping me alive. And it's like, I tell people, you take blood pressure medicine every day, I take chemotherapy, and it's amazing.